It's time to sell your DVD box sets on eBay because the news is out. Yes, the BBC have announced that the next series of classic Doctor Who to be released on Blu-ray is going to be Season 23, aka Trial of a Time Lord. So, what do we make of the Trial of a Time Lord these days? What's the packaging going to be like on the new Blu-ray edition? And what will the special features be? Let's find out now. Hello glorious one, I'm Jason Arnott, the author of The Last Days of Jack Sparks, Ghoster and some Doctor Who stuff. If you're new here, then you might want to hit subscribe down there so that you don't miss any future nonsense from me. This channel is all about the stuff that I'm obsessed with, including Doctor Who, obviously, horror films, retro video games and old school VHS. Right, so let's dive straight in and have a look at the new packaging of this Season 23 box set. Once again, I have to say that I love the overall approach that the BBC have taken to these releases. They're going to look fantastic together on our shelves. And say what you will about the Sixth Doctor's multicoloured dream coat, but it certainly makes for a beautifully eye-catching sleeve. The Trial of a Time Lord was, of course, the final season ever for the Sixth Doctor himself, Colin Baker. Personally, I drifted away from the show after Peter Davison left, but that really wasn't a reflection on Colin himself as the Doctor and his portrayal. Like a lot of fans at the time, I'd reached a certain age where going out and drinking beer and certain other activities were proving even more attractive than Doctor Who. When Colin Baker's stories then resurfaced on VHS and of course DVD, I then encountered a lot of these stories for the first time, including very much the Trial of a Time Lord. I mean, the Sixth Doctor era really is often as mad as Doctor Who ever gets, and often really bang out of order in terms of violence as well, which certainly appeals to me. Attack of the Cybermen, I'm a big fan of that, very much. I love a bit of hand-crushing madness. Yeah, love that. So, as you probably know, one of the really interesting things about the Trial of a Time Lord season was that its 14 episodes formed one long story. This format was unprecedented in Doctor Who, and it was kind of a risk taken by the production team, because if you have one long story but people don't like it, then you're sunk. However, having said that, the Trial of a Time Lord story is split up into 4 sub-stories, if you will, each of which has its own title. In a way, I guess that one long story had been done before in Doctor Who, because you could say that the Key to Time series was one long story with 6 bits. But I guess the difference with the Trial of a Time Lord is that throughout all 14 episodes we are constantly going back to that courtroom on Gallifrey where the Doctor, an extremely indignant Doctor, is being held trial, funnily enough. Unfortunately, the show forgot to tell viewers about the separate story titles, so you'd have the casual viewer turning on, seeing part 14, then turning off again. So what are the 4 sub-stories? Well, the first one is called The Mysterious Planet, which is a classic Doctor Who title if ever I heard one. The opening scene of The Mysterious Planet is notoriously one of the most elaborate and certainly expensive effect shots that classic Doctor Who ever had. And it really does stand up very well today with, I guess, I don't know, you call it a tracking shot, don't you, in your newfangled. One thing that I think is really clever about the Trial of a Time Lord and the way the whole format is set up is that when we watch these stories, we are actually watching the video evidence, so to speak. And that includes weird moments when things seem to be censored. And the Doctor is taking issue with that and saying that there's some kind of conspiracy against him. So I think that's really fascinating. I can't remember, if I'm honest, whether it actually goes anywhere satisfying, but I think it's a really nice idea. Other great things about The Mysterious Planet very much include the fact that it was written by Robert Holmes, the classic Doctor Who writer, and there's a very Holmesian character in there, Sabalom Glitz, a colourful and literally colourful character, very entertaining.
Oh, I do hate prison psychiatrists, don't you?
And thirdly, there's a very nice big robot, which is always a boon, isn't it? Always a boon. So The Mysterious Planet is 4 episodes, and so is the next story, entitled Mind Warp, and a mind warp it truly is. The standout features of Mind Warp are very much Brian Blessed as Ikanos.
Of course! I need my queen to grace my moment of triumph!
Delivering a typically subtle and understated performance. There's also, of course, the return of Syl, the sadistic slug-like creature first seen in the memorable 6th Doctor story Vengeance on Varos. And lastly, the most memorable thing about this story, and spoiler alert by the way, if you haven't seen it, maybe skip ahead a minute or so, is that they kill Peri.
You killed Peri?
They don't only kill Peri, but they kill her with a brain transplant. She suffers some kind of horrendous B-movie fate, having her brain transplanted, which is quite a surprise.
Kiv's brain is inside the head of that repulsive Earth being.
Quite a surprise. It certainly gives Nicola Bryant, who plays Peri, the chance to deliver a very different performance. It's the kind of performance that is, here's my body, but in fact my brain now belongs to someone else and I'm evil. Yes, that type of performance.
Oh, I like this!
Come part 14 though, Peri's death turns out to have not happened, which feels like a rather clumsy last-minute fix. The third 4-part story of season 23 is Terror of the Vervoids, which is possibly my favourite serial of this run, I think, because it has a kind of Robots of Death feel about it, which I rather like. There's a whodunit element, and of course, who can resist a bunch of plant-like humanoids, aka the Vervoids?
Are all the Vervoids here?
The highlight of Terror of the Vervoids for me comes at the end of the first episode, aka episode 9 of the overall season, in which there's some kind of compound, isn't there, with a wire fence, and someone gets electrocuted, causing Mel to scream her face off. Incredible stuff. And a genuinely great cliffhanger. The final story of season 23 is called The Ultimate Foe, and very much centres on the Valeyard, who has the terrifying ability to move around like people used to in Monty Python. The Master's in it too, which is great for me. Love a bit of Anthony Ainley. Sadly, part 13 of The Trial of a Time Lord, part 1 of The Ultimate Foe, would be the last thing for Doctor Who that Robert Holmes would ever write, because he became ill with a liver complaint and sadly died after that, leaving the script editor Eric Saywood to write episode 14 all by himself. So there's a really interesting and tangled production history there behind that whole series, and one that I really hope is going to be fully explored in the special features. So what are they? Special features. The first one on the list is a really good one. It's the fact that there's extended edits of all 14 episodes. Now, I'm not entirely sure whether that's optional or whether they are just extended. I would imagine they'd be optional in some kind of way, but I don't know. What I can tell you is that each of these 4 DVDs that comprise the original Trial of a Time Lord DVD box set did feature deleted and extended scenes. In the case of Terror of the Vervoids, it was 14 minutes of extra material, and so it looks as though that stuff has been sewn back in. Terror of the Vervoids is also going to have what has been described as a 4-part standalone edition with updated effects. Now, I'm not entirely sure what is meant by standalone. Does that mean that we won't have the courtroom scenes interlaced with the whole thing? I'm not entirely sure, but it'll be very interesting to see, and updated effects are always interesting to me. As long as the original effects are included, I think they're a great optional extra, and one that I often choose to have a look at, although pretty much always I prefer the originals. That's kind of weird, isn't it? How do you feel about updated effects on DVDs and Blu-rays? Let me know. I very much enjoy the behind the sofa format for special features on these releases. It's pretty much like a Doctor Who version of Gogglebox, isn't it? As various people from the show sit down to relive the episodes and tell us what they think. It's like a visual DVD commentary. Nice. As you'd expect, the behind the sofa episodes on this set feature Colin Baker, Bonnie Langford and Nicola Bryant watching the episodes, but also Fraser Hines, Mark Strickson and Matthew Waterhouse, so that should be entertaining. I'm also very much looking forward to a featurette called The Writer's Room, which sounds great because it's got Eric Saywood, Christopher Bidmead, Philip Martin and Whaley K. Daly, I think I'm pronouncing that correctly, talking about the lost version of season 23. So it sounds like there's going to be a lot of discussion about changes and all that behind the scenes production strife that I was talking about earlier. And I think that when you have Saywood and Bidmead involved, you know that there's going to be quite a lot of frank opinions being thrown about, because those two gentlemen do not give a toss. There's also a featurette called The Doctor's Table, in which we join Colin Baker having some friends over for dinner. I'm sure that'll be perfectly delightful. The culinary theme is continued by the Doctor Who Cookbook Revisited, in which various cast members have to try their own recipes that were in some kind of Doctor Who cookbook at the time. I managed to avoid that one. What else is there? Matthew Sweet, a very fine interviewer, interviews Bonnie Langford. There are rare archive treats, I'm told. There's convention footage, the obligatory Blu-ray trailer, which is bound to be fun. There are also HD photo galleries and a whole PDF archive full of scripts and costume designs and the like. Fantastic. The whole thing sounds like a really good effort. Given that The Trial of a Time Lord is not one of the most celebrated stories in classic Doctor Who history, I think it's really good that the BBC have really put some muscle behind cramming some of those special features in there. Yeah, it's really shaping up as a great package. I want to know downstairs in comments what you think of this whole series, which stories you do like, which stories you don't like, and what you think of the overall concept. You know, was The Trial of a Time Lord a sensible and wise format to adopt when we look back? Or after all these years have passed, do we think that it was indeed a misfire, as a lot of people seem to think? Personally, I'm looking forward to watching the whole thing again on this Blu-ray set. If you've enjoyed this video, then you might want to hit like or subscribe. And if you didn't enjoy it, then I'm going to insist that the video evidence has been tampered with. Thank you so much for watching till the end. I'll see you on Sunday, and until then, embrace your obsessions.
So is there something here that's always you?